Welcome to the Louis Talks podcast, where I do what I do best, chat and talk to people. And today on the podcast with me, I have got a guy called Mark McCulloch, the food and drink marketeer. I've been following Mark for quite a while on LinkedIn. He puts out some brilliant content, talks a lot about trends in the food and drink industry, has his own podcast, been on lots of other podcasts, and I've listened to him on his own podcast and as a guest, and think he's had such an incredible diverse experience and comes from more of a traditional marketing background, has had experience in lastminute.com and Barclays and many other big businesses, and then ended up getting into the food and drink industry via Yo Sushi, and has worked with Pret and many other big food brands. So I just really wanted to get him on, have a conversation about food and drink. Obviously, I'm incredibly passionate about food and drink as a chocolatier and chef, and I thought, what a great conversation to have. And enjoy this conversation with Mark. I'm sure you'll take a lot from it. I know I certainly did. And there's a huge amount of knowledge in this podcast. There's books and podcasts and all sorts of other things to go away and look into and research. I will put all of the links below in the podcast. But please enjoy this fantastic interview with Mark. Hi, Mark. Well, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast. As you know, I've been sort of following you on LinkedIn for quite a while. Love seeing all of your posts and content about the food and drink industry. And so just to start off, please tell the listeners what you do and a little bit about your story and how you ended up in this fantastic industry.
Yeah, well, you've caught me on a dressed down day, so that the hair's not as good as it could be, and I'm not dressed up as much as I might be. I'm suffering from a bit of the flu at the moment, so apologies on the sound of the voice. But what I'm doing at the moment, quite interesting. It's sort of flexing over time, which is getting sort of quite exciting and bringing lots of new adventures and things like that. So I guess my plan had always been that I would start out and have an agency, after Client Life, and I'd have about 20 people. I had my eye on this particular office in Brighton that looked sort of sideways onto the sea, and that was the plan. And I had this wonderful book called What's Stopping You? And I think it was by Robert Kelsey, I want to say. And anyway, what it says within that is, what's the last job that you want to have? And then you work backwards from there. So a few years ago, I was a bit unsure going back in my career when I was on the inside, if you like. I was at Yo Sushi. And basically when I was there, I was a little bit unsure what I was wanting to do. And, so I thought, I'll read this when I'm on holiday. I'm not usually a reader. I'm going through a mini MBA at the moment, and I enjoy watching the videos. I absolutely hate the reading part of things. So I'd rather someone just told me, so like an audiobook or something. So anyway, within this book, it said about this, but it also said in a 15-year sort of life plan, what did you want to do? And then work backwards, as I say. But then it was all things like, what front door will you have? What will your driveway be like? Will you have so many kids? Will you not have kids? Will you have a dog? Will you, and this really sort of built it up in my mind. And without sounding too, new age or new world or whatever, when you look at great sports people, they've imagined the shot before they've done it, so whether it's Michael Jordan or whether it's, I don't know, Ian Woosnam going back golf or, whoever the latest people are now. And in fact, I was just watching a documentary on Maradona just before you phoned, so I was trying to chill watching that. So, those great people have visioned it, because if you don't have the plan. So really, I knew I wanted to be based in brand and marketing and digital and social. I knew I liked variety. I knew I liked not being my own boss. I don't mean it that way, but I liked my freedom. Like, I don't really like sitting behind a desk or marching to someone else's tune as much. And I knew that I liked speaking, and I knew that I liked broadcasting. Radio is a massive, without sounding, a little bit too ham radio or, sort of hospital radio or anything like that. But, radio is a massive part of my life, music and all that. So I kind of added these things together with a life coach. And this was after I'd done it through this book, But the punchline on the book, actually going back to that, was I went all the way back, and the killer thing in this book, without spoiling it, was it said, what are you going to do tomorrow to make all of these things happen? So as soon as I got back from my holiday, I went and handed in my notice to Yo Sushi to start the next thing. So I always sort of like stepping stones, be it like, you know, whether it's Sonic the Hedgehog or Super Mario Brothers or whatever it is, and, you know, just those stepping stones to get to the boss level. And I guess that's where I'm at now. So with this business consultant that I saw, he was really fascinating because he just could stand above the whole thing and just say, right, you're going to have a portfolio bid. It's a little bit like Harry Potter, you know, you're going to be Gryffindor, or, you know, he just kind of plonked a hat on and said, this is what you are. So from that day forward, it was like, right, I do 6 or 7 things. But the real money, I suppose, comes in from consulting. And then on top of that, you get a little bit of network, so that helps. And then the rest of it, I guess I'm really seeing as personal brand building or business development to feed the other part, if you see what I mean. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now. And there's actually quite a big call at the moment, interestingly, with all the B word that's going on and all these things. But B2B is becoming something I'm getting asked more and more and more and more about. You know, how can these B2B companies penetrate into the restaurant industry or the hotel industry? So that's quite an interesting one, because the B2B people always feel that they should play second fiddle or they should have boring marketing. And I don't get that. That doesn't scan for me. And also they'll say things like, well, we shouldn't be on social media, or we shouldn't. And it's like, well, of course you should, because people aren't living their lives siloed like that anymore, I forget your other parts to your question. Was it? Sorry, I rambled on.
No, it's great. I mean, I think it absolutely answered. I mean, I think the thing is sort of, was food always what you wanted to go into? What sort of age did you know that this was the industry that you really wanted to focus on?
No, it wasn't at all. I wanted to do music. Well, initially I wanted to do sport. Like I did. I mean, bigger size now, I'd need to lose a few pounds, but back in the day I was pretty decent at basketball, and I thought something might happen with that. And then music was it really. So I became, just sort of playing, listening. And then once you're old enough to go to gigs, there's nothing more exciting, because you're discovering, I mean, girls, boys, whatever you're into, but, for me, girls, and you're discovering beer, and you're discovering late night, and you're discovering rock and roll and independence and all these things. And back then, I don't know if it's like this now with music, I don't want to sound like an old guy, but back then it was all tribes. You were a Stone Roses guy and you dressed like that, or you were a Oasis, or you were a punk, or you were a Blur, or you were, and that reflected so much in who you were and what you did and what you read and what you watched, and how, so you'd rather be watching Quadrophenia, or you'd be, watching some 60s psychedelic movie or something. So I liked that, and I liked the family tree. I mean, the thud of a bass drum when you go into a venue and the roadies are either at a festival. I mean, festivals even better, because a bit of grass in your beer, and all the normal grass, and that kind of stuff, and that thud of the drum right in the middle of your chest, as they're checking everything out in an empty field, those kind of things are really exciting. But my first jobs were with music, so I've been dead lucky in that I've visualised something and I've made it happen, and then I'm a bit like, oh, what's next then? Because you're luckily, all these things are always coming true in the main. So with the music one, it was disappointing because you got paid so little. You realised how cutthroat an industry it was. It was before streaming and stuff like that, really. The internet was only kind of happening, so this would have been 97 or something like that. So then fast forwarding, I thought, because I guess there's a few ways you can go. You can go with sort of sleeping with your best friend thing with music. It was a bit like, oh, got a bit too close. I shouldn't have done that. Keep that as a hobby. Great. Then there's, all right, is there another industry that I could get into that I'll love and I'll make that my professional thing? And then there's just marketing right across the bottom. So I thought I better get good at marketing first, and then you can always sort of deviate because marketing's market. You know, once you define it as a marketing, it doesn't matter if it is, you know, Diet Pepsi or it's a Wonder Bra or it's a light bulb or, you know, it doesn't matter. So, so basically went to lastminute.com eventually after a few sort of agency jobs. Didn't really learn about marketing, if I'm honest. The discipline of it, I learned about digital and I learned about digital marketing, which was all really new. And I also learned about brands. So I was really lucky. I got introduced to a guy called Robert Bean. So Robert worked on things like It's Good to Talk BT for any older people, Ultimate Drive Machine BMW, Power of Dreams Honda, Make a House Home Base, Dishoom, he worked on as well, and these kind of things. So he taught me, my title was actually head of brand, but I didn't know what brand meant at all until I met him. So he came in and taught me about brand, meaning a promise delivered, and then a process for you to define your brand. And we had basically had, I think we had 28 brands at lastminute.com, and we had to get it down to a number. It didn't matter how many, but a number that then wouldn't compete with each other. Because what Simon Thompson, the CMO, who's incredible, you know, one of the most incredible marketer I've ever met, he just nailed it when he said, look, we're actually fighting against each other's brands. We're betting on the same keyword and we're pushing the price up. That's madness, you know. So that was how I learned. So I sort of got to understand brand, could get away with marketing, I suppose. Certainly in the digital sense, I knew what I was doing, which the majority of the marketing fraternity didn't, because they didn't work on a digital brand, and digital marketing was very new. But if it was like Greg's, you would know about sausage rolls, I get. Do you know what I mean? So it was lastminute.com, you knew about selling holidays and hotels and theatre tickets through digital means. And then from there on, I went to Barclaycard. It was a finance role. Great for the CV, you know, to actually sit down and say, look, I understand how big businesses work. I understand about the agenda. I understand about this massive juggernaut going, and I've just got one pinky on it, you know, maybe not even that, you know, a fingernail, and that's as much as I'll be able to help it. I found that very frustrating because I think I'm a very good number 1, 2, maybe 3 at a push. I'm not a very good number 8 in an organisation. I just got frustrated really with it. But what I learned there was putting the brand stuff into practice, how big companies work, how big companies do incredible things to like get the message out there, but also the wastage that potentially comes with that. Also, I learned a lot about staying on target, you know, because you would never change your objectives, like hardly ever. So even if there was, you know, a global crisis, you were very rarely going to change your path. So you'd kind of stick to that. And then also I learned at that point internal employee engagement. So that was really starting to kind of 360 brand and marketing for me, because branding is fine, you know, the badge and all the rest of it. Brand is fine. But the real secret to great brands is actually great people being excited about the brand. And once that clicked for me, because, you know, we always talked about Guinness at Barclaycard, and you can make the best pint of Guinness ever. But when it goes into that pub, and maybe the pub feels a bit dodgy, or the pipes aren't clean, or the landlords are dead, do you know what I mean? Whatever. So when you add all that up and you go, well, that's a customer experience, and you don't have a lot of control over that. But what you can do is hopefully work with all the pubs that stock Guinness to get them excited about it and proud to pour a great pint of it and all these things. So yeah, so that was cool. And then food and drink happened. So Yo Sushi, I was just wanted to leave Barclaycard really. I knew my time was done. And yeah, wearing a tie wasn't really my thing. And I was lucky I picked up an old copy of Marketing Week, which is still good. Yeah, it's still good. And then in the back, it just said Yo Sushi Senior brand manager, I think, senior market manager, something like that. And then so I thought, oh, great. And I remember, I hadn't been to Yo for years, but I remembered them from 99, 2000, the time I was working with Enemy Loaded. And there was robots going round the, I don't know if you remember this, but there was robots that used to go around. So not the belt, there used to be actually robots serving drinks on tracks on the floor.
I don't remember that, no.
And it did that. It had, I'm sure it was in there, it might have been in Yo Below, the karaoke place, but it had, like, if you were smoking, it had like smoking cider, so you had ashtrays that it sucked in the smoke, and you had a beer dispenser. That might have been Yo Below, which was a kind of almost a karaoke kind of cool version of Yo in Poland Street. But yes, you had these robots going around, and I think one hit I hope I'm right in saying this, so I think it hit a disabled person in a wheelchair, so they had to get rid of them. But what happened as well was after 9 o'clock, they started to get a little bit aggro. So they would maybe say the odd swear word, maybe, or certainly were quite rude. So then they had the Asahi going past the Sapporo or whatever. So that was kind of cool. So yes, I remember them, and I wrote them a ransom note, and I just said, help, I've been captured by a bunch of bankers, get me out of here kind of thing. And luckily enough, it stood out enough. I was at Blur in Hyde Park, watching them. Always worried about my accent. Blur, Blur, the band.
Yeah, Blur.
So basically, you see them, and then my phone went. I was pretty drunk, and I think I was going to Loon. Picked up the phone, Yo Sushi. Oh, the CEO wants to see you tomorrow, and I'm thinking. So, sobered up pretty quick and started thinking about that, but I think it was 5 interviews before. It was quite a gang, wow. to sort of get into, and I was very much an outsider, so that was quite tough to get in there. But once you got in, it was fine. But it was a bit like, we don't trust you marketers. And I think some marketing that had happened before, whether agency or in-house or whatever, I don't know, there was a mistrust, let's say, between them. So I had to try and build up those relationships again. And that's when I started to kind of fall in love with food, really, and got into it. Yo was a fun brand to be with, but then kind of reasonably selfishly then put myself out into the industry as well. So started doing a lot of talking, sort of speeches at Peach or laterally Propel, RMI, MCA, Fourth Summits, just anyone that would kind of have me. And it was so much a tip for anyone who's in this position. If you work for a brand, then it's so much easier for you to network than if you work for an agency. As soon as you say I'm from an agency, like nowadays, and so I have to then track back and go, oh, but I used to work for you, and I used to work for Pret, and I used to work, and they're like, oh, you must be okay then, I think. But they'll just turn away from you, like physically turn away from you at dinner. So do your networking while you're on the inside, if your intention, just do it anyway, but if your intention is to then become a consultant or an agency later on, absolutely do your networking early. But I mean, that was 7 to 10 years of, I was only there for 2 years, but within food and drink, it was that amount of time to, just make sure that I knew the right people, they knew what I did, I got enough scores or awards or testimonials or well dones or whatever it was, articles, whatever, to just then say this guy is all right at what he does, and that helped you stand out. I think another thing that helped and still helps, I don't feel like I've ever joined the food and drink industry. I still feel like a wee bit of an outsider. I don't feel like the sort of grey-haired sort of, the fraternity, the elders or anything. And I think that's been quite good for me because I'm not the usual, I worked in a pub, my mum and dad's pub, and then I went to this and then I did, and that's all really, superb experience. But I kind of came at it from a different angle, and then I've been lucky enough that I've been accepted, I think. So, but I think it's important that I still keep an eye outside of the industry as well, because there's not enough people with a marketing discipline in food and drink. and that's because they come up through that route. They maybe put on a few good events once, back in the day, and they become the marketing person, and there's nothing wrong with that. All I'm saying is just being mindful of making sure that you go back to school and you learn the actual discipline, because you're probably only operating within a tenth of the possibilities. And then today's classic is, they're really good at Twitter. They work in one of the pubs and, oh man, you should see their Twitter. And all of a sudden they're the marketing manager and you're like, oh, wait a minute, that's quite a leap, that. But that's a lack of education all round, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, sure. It is definitely an interesting industry, because I think for me, I guess learnt the craft through my own business, and I suppose, running my own business, it was chocolate business, and we were sort of marketing UK and overseas. But you do realise, I mean, all of my knowledge of marketing, as you said, actually came outside of the food industry. It was with mentors and friends and advisors from agencies or marketing background, and it did strike me that for such an emotional industry, the food industry wasn't putting into place some of the most basic marketing principles, and especially the sort of 5 cents marketing, which some of the really big businesses of the world do, the aroma and taste and texture and all of these sort of things, but understanding it from that brand and customer journey level. And so I think I was extremely lucky to meet people in marketing early on who actually explained to me what brand was, because obviously I think, and I still get it on a weekly basis, people think the brand, like you said, is a colour scheme and a logo, and that's it. That's where it ends. And I think that, I don't know what you think of this challenge, but I've always found it interesting. I sometimes feel like I'm fighting that a little bit, because I think marketing, people understand maybe to a deeper extent. They kind of understand that it's this outreach, whether it be through digital or traditional or whatever it might be. But brand is this kind of slightly woolly, soft thing that people don't really understand. And there's sort of, guys in braces and tweed jackets in London, in Shoreditch, who actually, I think, sometimes put people off branding, because they think it's this kind of cool kid thing that people talk about. But actually, I just think, if I was to explain brand, and I don't know, I'd love to know your opinion, but I think for me, it's moving from transaction into emotional purchasing. Is that sense of moving somebody from just buying something for a price and the next day going to something else, but then or creating that emotional connection where somebody actually is seeking out your product or your restaurant or whatever it might be, purposefully, emotionally, and connecting with it on a deeper level. So yeah, I'd love to know your thoughts, I guess, on brand and how you kind of communicate that as well.
Yeah, I mean, well, you've put it very well. I mean, I think the thing with me coming where I've came from and the education that I've had and stuff, I try and make it even more simpler. Like, I just go really base on it, where, basically I'm talking to people where I'm saying, I think I talk about quite a lot, actually, is Alex Ferguson. So I went to see him speaking a few years ago, and he said the reason at the time, not so much now, but that, Man U were so good, was that they only ever thought about 3 years' time, and every other manager thought about, the next game. And that is such a good example of what brand and marketing is, because brand will have that emotional connection that you talk about, and then that will also help you be forgiven for things. So if you look at, there's a great book from years ago called Love Brands, or Love Mark. Is it Love Mark it's called? Love Brands, Love Mark. And basically it talks about all these hits that you can take. So, for example, there's some well-loved sandwich chains lately that have had some bad news that, basically, unfortunately, so, one person died and all that. But the amount of love that was in the bank for them, that will just help them weather that storm. Whereas if that was a brand that no one really cared about, or was vilified anyway, then that could have been curtains for them. I think also, if you look at Pizza Express in the last few days as well, Pizza Express is coming out as loved as, Marks and, I mean, maybe not quite Apple standards, but certainly Marks and Spencer's and national institution status, where people would be sad if it went. And that is something just that you can't really define. You know, it's goodwill on a balance sheet, it's goodwill. But if you think about flying Virgin or Southwest Airlines or whatever, and you think about flying Ryanair, all of a sudden you've got a picture in your head about the brand. Ryanair's transactional. You know, brands as well, like the brands that are in train stations, where, you know, you've got your upper crusts and, you know, Dilly Stefan stuff. That's a great example of people like the brands, sure, they go to them and all right, but are they loved versus something like a Pret? So that's a transactional play versus a sort of ongoing, you know, sort of, yeah, just emotional play. So, as I say, the best way I've had it described to me is that a brand is a promise delivered. Now, you've got, like, back to the Ryanair or the Virgin, you know, thing I was talking about, you've got in your mind, in that value exchange of you giving over money, what you're going to get back, what kind of service you're going to get back, or what kind of taste, you know, if it's Heinz baked beans versus, you know, homemade or someone's own brand or whatever, you've got a very sure expectation in your mind. So I always thought that really helped. And the way I've always had it taught to me from Robert Bean, and his book's worth getting, by the way, on Amazon. It's very cheap. It's like $14.99 or something, but it's a great book in terms of being an easy read that tells you how to define your brand. But basically,
what book? Sorry, just to cut in. What book was that again, Mark?
So it's by Robert Bean, and it's called Winning in Your Own Way. I think it's got a subtitle as well of like the 9.5 golden rules of branding, I think. And I think the half is always people, because people always change. You know, they're variable. But he talks about there being 3 parts to any business. So he talks about a brand being made up of your culture, your products and services, and your reputation. And if you imagine there are 3 circles that are apart from each other, then what you need to do is get them to be overlapping. So for you to do that, you need to figure out what the glue is that holds them all together. And that's the bit that you're talking about, I think, which is and it can be said in so many ways, you know, the brand DNA, the brand essence, the brand positioning, the brand promise, you know, it's all the same thing. So whichever, I think Robert calls it the single organising principle, you know, people talk about it in different ways. And I think this is why there is this mistrust of the whole thing as well, because people get it wrong, they get it too complicated, they make it sound too like Ponzi, they make it sound too unreachable. But I, you know, sort of basically boil it down to about 7. I've got a process that's sort of based on Robert's actually, so, you know, he's taught me this over the years, but I've tweaked it slightly. But I've got about 7-ish questions. But I think certainly in food and drink, some other brands might want it all flowery and exciting and you know, unreachable and vague. But most of the people that we're dealing with are food and drink operators, and it's operators that usually run the business. Very rare that marketers are at the top, or even that they've got a seat at the boardroom table. So what operators just want is guarantees. They want sure things. So they want it to be as simple as possible, and they want to know if they put this in, they get this out. But what I'm finding from doing this is the hardest thing in the world is people actually doing it. So you do the work, and you get it all down in, you know, what's your tone of voice, what's your USPs, what is this in a nutshell, blah, 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 blah. And then you say, right, what are you going to have to do to align your business to these 3 things? And that's where it gets hard to do. And, you know, then I go in and do these captain workshops where I go, right, captain culture, what do you think we will need to do to align this to, you know, captain products, captain services, captain reputation. But it's really interesting that out of, I must have done it for nearly 100 brands now, and you'd be lucky if 20% of them really did it. And a great example is, that's through my accent again, but Bills.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, Bills, yeah.
whiskey, not the whiskey, the cafe restaurant, the restaurant Bills, Bills.
Yeah.
Just I say everyone's like the whiskey, right? Yeah. But they've been a great example of doing it. They took it really seriously. With that, there was an identity overhaul. There was alignment amongst the three areas. Products and services being one area that's instead of four. And you can go and look up the figures and see what they're doing. And they sort of really meant it. And I think that's the difference, that so many people will either not do it at all. They'll do it in a while. They'll start it and then never finish it. Or someone comes in with a better idea or whatever. And then the fourth one is they actually do it. And I'm probably being kind by saying 20% of people do it. So it's disappointing because you've done an awful lot of work to get it there. But at the same time, I guess you still get paid and fine. But I'd like to see things live. I like to see, and then there's other culprits where all of a sudden it just becomes a strapline, whatever, and then that's all, they just plaster a strapline everywhere. And it's like, right, okay. But yeah, I mean, it's pleasing. But I think it's like that with any agency. There's probably even advertising campaigns or whatever. You never truly get a clear runway to make it work the way that you want it to work. So that's hard. But yeah, so that as I say, I think brands are promised delivered. And what are the 2, 3, maximum 4 words that are holding the whole thing together? And are you aligned inside and out to that? And if you are, because if you look at Disney, for example, what is it? It certainly used to be magic for children of all ages. Kind of says everything, doesn't it? And that's like, and everyone is obsessed by these words. Whereas, the not so, I don't know, Merlin Group, or does that seem as sharp? I don't know.
Yeah. I know, and I think this is the difficulty, isn't it? That the frustration, I suppose, for us and many other people that are in the industry is that that it can benefit, that it can work. It's just, as you're saying, getting people to actually take that step, and I think it's kind of a human condition. I see it within business coaching. I've got a lot of friends who are sort of consultants in general across many different industries, from sort of finance all the way through to friends who are personal trainers in gyms. And so there's this whole spectrum of, I think there's a lot of people that want to do something, that want to improve, look at the self-improvement industry and personal development industry. It's huge. But I remember going to see a talk, I'm trying to remember his name, Dominic something, again, marketeer, had his own agency in London. This was about 8 or 9 years ago. And he did this incredible presentation about brand. And I just felt at the time he was one of these first people that was giving away all of his secrets. He literally just stood there in front of this presentation and said, this is how I've built brands. This is what I did. And I went up to him afterwards and said, Dominic, that was an amazing presentation, but are you not scared that you're literally giving away your secrets? And he looked at me and went, there's probably going to be 2 people in this room that actually use those. And I thought it was a really interesting thing. It's weird, It's like when, especially with brand and marketing and these kind of things, I've had it with a lot of clients as well, same as you. You go in, you have all these big sessions, you put all the plans in place, you start to do everything, you pull it all together, and then nothing happens.
You take your top 2 in any industry, right? So you give, back then, if you gave Eat the prep playbook, you give, I don't know, Pepsi the Coke playbook, you give Burger King and McDonald's, they wouldn't be able to execute it. They just couldn't. And or Nike and Adidas. I mean, I don't know who's top out of those. I imagine, and I'm hoping it's Nike. I'm more of a Nike guy. But, from that perspective, they just couldn't do it. And you're right. I mean, we should all be walking around with 6-packs and, and healthy as you like and all the rest of it. But there is just something in us that stops us. I don't know what that is. I can't explain that one. And I'm the world's worst for it. I know what's good for me, and I don't do that.
Yes, I think it's, I guess it's our own Rubik's Cube to figure it out, and I suppose that in our own ways, we figure out little bits in our life and feel like we found another piece of the puzzle, and then you move a little bit further ahead. And some people are just faster at finding puzzle pieces than others, or I don't know. I don't know what that system is, but it is difficult. And I find that, I thought for a long time that I could just sort of help everyone and train everyone how to be successful. And I've kind of come to the conclusion that that's not really been the case. I can help people that are ready to be helped, and that's kind of it, really. That's where it seems to end. And like you said, I think even if you go into a business and help in a small way, you do as much as you can and you try as hard as you can to get the results. But ultimately, it is up to the person, the business owner, the team, the management, whatever it might be, to whether they take that on board or not.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Carry on.
Well, I just think it's. I think one of the things that worries me the most in business is two things, actually. I think there's ego stroke defensiveness, and I think there is change in personnel. And I think that's the hardest thing. I've seen it in a couple of clients even lately, where the directors go over someone's head and they go, you've got to come in, our marketing's a bit, and all of a sudden then they introduce you to the market manager, and then the walls come down, or the curtains go down, or whatever it is, and then that's it. Or it is just, you're locked in, you're ready to go on this journey, you're going brand all the way through brand development, you're going through, and then, we've got rid of so-and-so, or so-and-so's somebody, you're doing it with the CEO, and then a CMO joins, who that's not what they wanted, and I think that organised, and I think Robert's right, back to the 9.5 rule. I think that people thing can really hinder businesses, like, so badly, and that's from management team not being able to delegate, not being able to tell people they're not doing a good job, through talent, through people wanting to help themselves to become a better professional. There's all these things. So it's that's the biggest puzzle of all of it, because the rest of it is pretty much zeros and ones, and quite easy to do. But I think it's the people thing that freaks me out more than anything.
Yeah, it's very true. Yeah. And I think as well, I heard a really good analogy recently, a guy called Jonathan Winchester, and he said, in businesses, you've got taps and sinks, and you have to figure out, you need more of a ratio of taps than sinks. And so, it's kind of going through that systematic process to figure that out in your business, because otherwise it doesn't matter how good your brand is. It doesn't matter how good your marketing is. But ultimately, if somebody picks up the phone, and there's a sink on the other end, oh, hello, that suddenly that energy's lost, the brand isn't transferred, and whether it's somebody in a restaurant serving, whether it's a chef, whether it's a marketeer, whether it's somebody in the office, it doesn't really matter. That across the board is all part of building the right people. And I think this is where I hear it a lot, which is nice to hear. A lot more people are saying, we don't hire for skill, we hire for attitude. And I think that's so important for businesses, to look at the attitude of the people that they're hiring, because, you can always be upskilled, you can always be trained, but what is more difficult to train is emotional intelligence. It's not impossible, and I think a lot of companies are doing it with mental health in the workplace and employee engagement, and I'm just about to do a piece in a client's business around emotional intelligence, and actually doing some workshops about it, because I think it's very easy in a high pressure environment to lose that emotional intelligence and sort of sensitivity and empathy towards the other people in the business. But, as we, grow and develop, I think we all need to be really aware of it.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. And I think that mental health thing's, such a big thing, because I don't know if it is true, but it does feel that in a working week, you're getting through what feels like 2 or 3 lots of weeks worth of stuff. I think it's only getting faster. It's only getting, maybe not harder, but I don't think you've got the ability to switch off as much. I think people are finding, and I certainly find it really difficult to like weekend even, I've like forgotten how to even weekend because you're sort of in a half day mode almost or something like that. But I think, again, it's just, and for you to be good at anything and for you to be good at any job, I think you have to use that downtime to stay ahead, like just never being caught being caught napping. Yeah. I think it's one of those things, and that's forever what I'm doing is just, lists. What could be the next question? Where could I be getting caught out? Where could I be getting this wrong? What's the next thing that's going to happen? Where's the next thing coming from? What's the next speech? And I think it's just, it depends who you are as a person, but if you are wanting to be the best at what you can possibly do, I think that's a good thing. And and I think, as you were saying as well, just finding out those puzzle pieces. I've been sort of doing a bit of that lately. So I've been working with a guy called Mark Pitcher. I don't know if you know.
No, I don't
Mark
know.
So Mark, he's got a sort of podcast, a business called Smash the Box, and he's basically helping people find their purpose, which I've been sort of working with him on. So I was really interested to understand his process, how he gets there, but it's the hardest thing in the world when the mirror's reflected on you. You do it for businesses all the time, but you can see how painful it is for them, and actually you're applauding them because they're doing that. So that's one piece, which was almost a kind of personal piece, and then the second piece was going back to school to do this mini MBA with Marketing Week. So it's 12 weeks. So 12 weeks of modules, going through. But what they've done so well, it's a guy called Mark Ritson, who's kind of the marketing professor guy. But he's been so clever in that he's just taken that 12-week module from the 2-year MBA course and just said, just do the marketing bit. Don't worry about, I don't know what the other bits are. I'm guessing there's economics in there, and I guess there's accountants in there, and there's maths in there and whatever. But, I thought that was such a clever thing to just go, let's take that slice out. And what that's given me and the other people that are doing it, it's given you a further structure in terms of going, you're talking about great brands earlier. Well, the best brands in the world are market orientated. And it's you learning those basics again to go, the best brands in the world are the ones that are obsessed about the customer. And, that's all they care about, like what customers want, need, and it's your P&Gs and your Unilevers and, and this is the ones that you might love some of their brands, but you certainly admire their balance sheet, in terms of the amount of money they're making. And just that approach and being true to doing research and, and all the rest of it. So I think that's been such not an eye-opener, but it's certainly been a refresher in terms of how this whole thing plugs together. And then I think he's got a brand management course as well, which I was keen to maybe look at next year. But you can't do that one until you've done the first one. So, yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I think it is that constant case of kind of layering, isn't it? In many ways, it's more knowledge and developing, and because, I think especially in the digital space, things change so quickly at such a rate that you've always got to stay that little bit ahead, and sometimes, like you said, going back and learning the basics and really understanding. And I think for me, I sort of did a lot of that by working inside agencies as well, in sort of partnerships and things, and, really figuring out what is this marketing and branding thing, because everyone's got a slightly different idea, and everyone's obviously slanted more towards certain aspects of marketing. So I think it's really important, that constant development. But I also think it's like you said, marketing is marketing, right? It's doesn't matter what you're selling, doesn't matter what it is, but then once you get past a certain point, it's then the specificity of that marketplace and really understanding the personas and the market and what's happening. And I think the food industry is a really interesting one because there's so much innovation and things now move so quickly. I mean, I remember, years and years ago, going to the International Food and Drink Expo, you'd go and you'd see some of the trends. And sometimes it would take like 2 or 3 years and then you'd see it kind of merging into the stores. Whereas now that doesn't seem to be the case at all. You know, literally something comes out in, you know, one of the food mags or it's at one of the expos and suddenly you go back the next year to the NEC or another one and there's like, you know, 20 of the same business that's setting up. So I think that even with the food and drink industry, things move so quickly and there is so much innovation and it's a very exciting place to be. But I think the only danger for I think a lot of businesses now is, and it happened in chocolate, when something becomes popular everybody jumps in. It's like everyone trying to board the same boat. So I think that can be a little bit problematic. So I'd kind of love to know your thoughts on the food industry and kind of marketing and like current what's going on from your perspective at the moment.
Yeah, there's a lot in that. I mean, I think the first thing I'd say is going back, just be sure how you're compartmentalising all of this. So brand is its own thing. Marketing, planning, strategy is its own thing. Digital's fine, but digital's just a channel. Digital's just another poster or just another TV ad. So what happens a lot is people get them all merged and confused. So just make sure that you've got your brand, and part of that's brand development as well. So another great thing I've learned from this MBA thing is the greatest brands have brand codes. Now, you look back at your brand, whatever it is, you know, I don't mean you personally, but, you know, the brand that you work on, anyone sort of listening to this, and you'll start to potentially see that your brand has got nothing about it. You know, it hasn't got the colour, it hasn't got the uniqueness, it hasn't got the logo, it hasn't got the font, it hasn't. You look at a lot of brands in the high street now, and they've got nothing. You know, they've went to like looks like Fiverr for their logo, and they've got nothing. They've got a strapline that doesn't make sense because there'll be a, I don't know, it can't be long before we get a cauliflower concept, but then it will still be trying to sell you soup. Do you know? So I think there's a lot of ill thought out stuff in there, and hopefully through the issues that we've saw with the industry, I think hopefully people will be putting their minds to better concepts, and actually thinking about growth in a slower sense, because you know the greatest brands are growing quite slowly. When you look at innovation in the marketplace, so again, this is a product bucket rather than anything else. So there's a product bucket, which is innovation. But then on top of that, you've got a product bucket that is more logistical. So you've got something like, you know, Gusto or Deliveroo or, you know. So it's trying to just compartmentalise all of that. Now, there was a great phrase years ago from Charles Dunstan, who owns still, I think, Carphone Warehouse, but certainly Five Guys and Mod, or certainly head franchisee for it, whatever. And he said to Brent Hoberman at lastminute.com, who started lastminute.com, if you do something first, it's for the customer. If you do something second, it's for you. And although there's a lot of tales of, you know, someone winning X Factor, but the number 2, 3, 4 doing better than them, I know that happens in life and in products. But at the same time, I think there's a spirit of that. And what you can see through pretty quickly in the main is someone who's not doing it for the customer. So they just dive on that boat you're talking about and they'll get thrown off or sink pretty quickly, and deservedly so. So I think that if you're doing it because you think numbers stack up in a spreadsheet, I know that's a utopian sort of view or whatever, but it just makes me sad, and it makes me sad that you know, people that aren't in and around the industry, you know, have never ran anything, I've never worked on anything, you know, they just pile their money in and they just want to be able to say at a dinner party that this is theirs. Whereas, you know, you really applaud the Green and Blacks guys, the Cost and Press guys, you know, Mark Palmer and the guys over there. because they know it, they live it, they breathe it, they get it. But when you see you see it when you go to these food fairs, they're just 10 a penny. It's a natural drink, or it's pot scratchings that are made out or whatever, or So I think it's important just for people to be able to take a step back and not just rush in there, and I think what I would say is, if you had to choose anything of where you could start from, start at a great product. And once you've got a great product, then look at, great people to deliver that. The brand can come a little bit later on, because if you're an independent and it is just stamped on your coffee cup that it's the Federation of something, people will just know it's a great place. And actually the worry is, you looking too branded will actually take that emotional thing, back to what you said earlier on, out of that. So I think you've got to be careful. I think the only advice would be is, be like Bleecker Burger, or, pick your thing. But, Zan taking 2 years to find the roll in the bread, and actually it was a little dinner roll that wasn't a burger bun at all. And then working with the person to then, that's what it's about, whereas too many people are just going, how cheap can I get it? Or what if I go for that? I've been in brand meetings where people have said, we were asked to, I'll say something like, what's your story then? Tell me about all the good stuff and where this came from and the authenticity and the passion. And, and they'll go, oh, well, we're tasked with making 2, brands that would make money. Oh, right, okay, shit. Right, just like, it's difficult to then, you get 8 hours in front of you to then actually, sort of come up with something good. Yeah. So there's that. And then the other side of things is, as well, is then you get into the USP. This is why this brand process is so good. And you go, what's your USPs? And they'll go, oh, well, that really good beef that you get that everyone uses? And, oh, yeah, well, we use the exact opposite. Right? Great. Is that what people want? Is that, or, you've heard of aged beef. We don't use aged at all because, that's our USP. And it's like, well, but everyone's, sort of brought up on the fact that aged is the right way to go, or whatever. Or we age it for 100 days, and then when you look into it, actually the maximum you should age anything for is X, or, and then people say, oh, it's our team. Our team's the best thing. Is it? Really? Better than, Pret? Doubt it. If they get more arms, or they get more legs, what's going on? So, I mean, that's where you really get found out, and that's when you find out that it is the top 0.5% of brands that actually, and it goes back to, guess what? The ones that do really great product with a really great team, it will feel like they've got a great brand, but actually it's the other 2 things that have informed that. And yeah, they've got a great concept, but, so you name them now, Nando's, Wagamama, Dishoom, Hawks Noir, who else? Pret. I mean, Franco Manca's looking pretty decent at the moment. Pizza Pruggin's looking decent. Honest Burger's looking pretty decent. There's about 10 that you put your house on, and the rest of them you're kind of going, not sure. So it's tough, but the issue is that you've got, sort of average people running uncared for brands that have just lost their way, which is a shame. And, another great Robert Beanism was, you can never shrink a business to greatness. It just doesn't happen, but everyone thinks they can outplay the system. We'll use cheaper products. We'll use people on zero thing. We'll have cheaper uniforms. Or we'll take that unit in Richmond, but it's off pitch. It just doesn't make sense, but for some reason they think that they're the exception.
Yeah, it's very true. And I think I find it's almost in a kind of strange way. People find it quite funny probably saying this, but almost like the infection of entrepreneurialism in the food industry. There has been, I feel, particularly in the last probably 10 years or so, this idea that suddenly the food industry could make me some money, Whereas I think if you look at long ago, and even if you look at, mainland Europe, I've obviously chocolatier by trade. I've got a lot of mates over there who are chocolatiers, and they have one absolutely beautiful shop in Ghent or Brussels or Bruges, and that's it. And they might sell in a few retailers, but those products are absolutely mind-blowingly incredible. You can just taste the care, time, attention, passion exuding from every single ounce of that product. But I think then the problem is that when you've had the business industry and entrepreneurs come in, and I've always said I'm an entrepreneur by default. I left school and I started a chocolate business, and that was it. I never started it thinking I want to make loads of money, or, I want to turn it into a business. It's like, I love chocolate. It's a passion. I'll make it work somehow. And I think that, as you say, sometimes that's part of the problem, is that if that isn't coming from the right place, and I think it's true of any product, right? The food industry is particularly true of that, I think, because it's such a multi-sensory experience. You can taste good food, and it's such a deep human psychological connection with our food because we need it to survive. So we're pretty emotional about what we eat. But I think it's very apparent in the food industry. Some businesses can get away with it a little bit more and kind of trick people with smart marketing and products. But as you say, it always does come out in the end. You look at a product and you touch it or you feel it, or, if it's clothes, you wear it and the seam comes undone and a button falls off, and all of these things start to come through. And you do look at it and think it's obviously there's no passion there. And
scale is the most dangerous word in food and drink. How can we scale this?
Yeah.
It's the thing that's killed most of it. Because it's the old, again, not getting too whatever biblical or whatever, but I think there's some sort of at least urban legend with a fat cat American that's on a holiday and sees the guy fishing, and he's having a chat with the guy. I could scale this business for you and you'll make millions. And he's like, just want to play with my son. So I think it's so tempting if you really believe in a product to go. But funnily enough, the brands that really should believe in the product are still staying humble. And the ones that have got no business believing in the product are the ones that are chucking loads of cash after it, But I just do wonder when people will learn, the mistakes of the ones that went before. But it's just, again, it's human nature. It's when you're standing at the roulette wheel. It's why you chuck on that extra $50 you don't have, or people just think. But and everyone wants to pay off their mortgage, right?
Yeah, that's very true. Very
the back
true.
Of the, everyone wants to, but it's tough. It's really hard out there, and I think when you've got a market that's flat, if not going slightly negative, and you've got far too much supply for demand, and you've got the aggregators coming in as well, where you can have that perfectly okay restaurant experience in your couch. So another thing I was talking about the other day was experience. People saying about, we're going to revitalise our brand and make it about an experience. How good is that going to get? Is Pret's service an experience? It's just really good service. Whereas, think what people are looking at in the Instagram age now of experience. It is Inception Group, the Phileas Fogg sort of thing, or Swingers, or Putt Shack, or Junkyard Golf, or Flight Club. That's an experience. So I think having great service should just be a hygiene factor, shouldn't it? With great product.
That is very true.
And I don't know if great service alone is going to be enough to get people back into your restaurant that might be failing now. So yeah, it's a tough old gig, but so many people don't do the work to start back at the start. And I think that's the thing. If you find, so kind of like meditating, right? I don't know, Buddhist master, and he said, if you've counted to 11, you've went too far, right? So the whole thing is, if you're up counting through to your 10 being success, stroke enlightenment, in the middle somewhere, you're probably going to lose it. Then you go back to zero. And I think that would be the best advice for a lot of people. But what they do is they go back to zero and then they try and shortcut that. They bring in the wrong people. So they kind of start due south when they should be going due north or whatever. But yeah, I think there's a lot in that. Just that discipline of, if you're playing golf and you're always slicing the ball, what do you go and address? You address your stance and your swing and every bit of it. It's just the same thing. It's a process, it's a discipline. But people just hack away, don't they? And are happy with their 90-odd score,
Yeah, very true. Very true. And I think the challenge is, most people don't want to do that work. And, I sort of hand on heart, I can say it took me a long time to actually have the business, realised I didn't want it, realised it wasn't fulfilling me, to then figure it out. As you say, you go back to the starting point. But I think then once you've had a few of those things happen, there's that sense that, and I say to a lot of people, to read into philosophy and psychology and these kind of things, because obviously, we're a kind of human animal, and finding out those needs and the real basis of understanding for why we want to do something. And your kind of example brought back, the fisherman, a really good example where I was in a very business mindset at the time, and I remember I was in Mexico City. It was our biggest export market, so I used to spend a lot of time over there, and a friend took me to this backstreet restaurant that looked like it hadn't seen a lick of paint for about 20 years. Absolute dump. It's sitting on like garden furniture, and there's this handwritten menu, and then this guy comes over who's the chef, and it's literally him, his wife and her brother, and that's it. Tiny little restaurant, probably 35 covers at most, and it's still today the best meals I've ever eaten were at his place. And at the time I remember saying to him, like, why don't you do something? You could get an investor, you could get this big swanky restaurant. But and he's like, look, I studied cordon bleu in France, I worked at all these Michelin restaurants, I worked in Paris, in London, in Barcelona, in Milan, all these places, but I'm just really happy. He said, I go to the market in the morning, I buy all my food, I come back, I write my menu, I get to be with my wife every day. It's like, I'm happy. Like, why I come to work when I want to, I leave when I want to leave, and at the time I don't think I really got it, and it took years for that to really sink in and go, actually, that's a very smart guy who was just very happy with what he had and didn't think he needed a £500,000 restaurant in Mexico City and all the stress and the hassle that came with it. He's just really happy with his little restaurant, and he always had the longest queue of people trying to get in because the food was just so good.
All starts with product.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess if you were to, I suppose, summarize your advice, two parts to this. One, to the food and drink industry with everything. We've kind of gone through a lot of it, but any sort of parting advice for somebody. And then secondary, as a consultant, if there's anyone obviously listening who wants to go into the sort of consultancy side of things, you touched on a few bits earlier, but again, any parting advice?
Yeah, the food and drink stuff. I mean, I think there's, I've always said sort of start now in terms of your networking, getting to know people. When people are so generous with their time and their thoughts and their effort, but make it your business to be out 3, 4, 5 nights a week. Going and visiting restaurants. Look at things like hot dinners, for example. That's always got, here's the new restaurants, the openings this week. Here's what's going on. Gavin used to sit next to me weirdly that runs hot dinners at lastminute.com, so he's done really well with that. So I think if you want to be part of the food scene, be part of the food scene. Get to know people. I think be memorable. So have something about you. Think about, not to make it contrived, but think about your personal brand. What is it saying about you online? What you're wearing? How do you leave? people sort of feeling? What do you leave them with? Just get involved in a lot of the free stuff. So whether it is speaking or at events, whether it is the charity stuff, there's a lot of charity stuff going on. You can get involved in nights out. Attend all the conferences that there are. Just be really active. The downside is it doesn't pay brilliantly. So, if you're going to leave financial services or, an investment house and, you're going to drop wages by at least a half. But it depends how happy you want to be. I think the nice thing about the industry is they are an industry of people that make people happy. I think it's hard though. I think with some people that you might work with, I mean, literally their livelihoods are on the line every single day. And through that doesn't come HR complaints and, all these things. You'll get duffed up a few days if you get something wrong. It can be tough. There's a lot of emotion that goes with it. I think it's very unsociable hours. So even although you're a marketing person, don't expect to be working 9 to 5 during the week and getting all your holidays and whatever. I mean, obviously take your holidays, but, just be flexible around when things are happening. It's very knee-jerky. So, again, if you're a disciplined marketer, then don't expect it to be, planning sessions and all this. It's shit, sales are down, sort this out now, which can be hard. There's not a lot of marketing budget. I mean, expect your marketing budget to be 0.5% to 1% of total turnover, which is not a great way to work out marketing budgets, but it's fact. Social won't solve everything. So make sure you understand, because they are still quite bricks and mortar businesses, and there's a lot that you don't do with that. Look for opportunities to add value. So if you're within the industry and within the brand that you are, put your hand up for everything and say yes. And then on top of that, also make sure that everything is nailed. So, for example, something they might not be doing right now, you could, as a pet project, is something about voice or something about delivery or something about getting onto Amazon or meal kits or gift cards, or just how could you pay for yourself? And that's how you'll get up the ladder pretty quickly. I think the upsides are, I think getting career progression can be really quick. It can be really quick. I mean, if you look at Pano at Prep, for example, I mean, he was an assistant manager or something, right? And he's just became CEO within, I want to say 19, I think it is 19 years the other day. Yeah. So, from that perspective, the kitchen porter can, Cinderella can go to the ball and all that stuff. So I think that's great. I think as much work as you want to put in is definitely what you'll get out. And I think there's also so much opportunity for you to start your own thing. In terms of a consultant, I think definitely make sure you've got a great network run about you, for years before you even think about jumping ship. Do a little brand DNA on yourself, get a good name, get a good cred slide, make sure the name is pretty much free across all digital channels and also within Companies House. Probably try and have about 6 months' wages as a float, just to give you cash flow. Just personal stuff like August there was a disaster for most people that I know. It went really quiet. I think Brexit's on the thing, but also on top of that, I think people are just more and more winding down the last 2 weeks of July and then not starting up again to middle of September. So that's pretty much 2 months where you probably won't see all your clients, no new business is happening. So just factor those things in when you're doing it. And as you go forward, figure out who your perfect dates are. Don't just say yes to, initially say yes to everything and also say yes to free stuff and just to get stuff up and running. But eventually make sure that you know what makes a good client for you and also what you should be saying yes to and what you should be saying no to. I'm still rubbish at that, but I think it's a good advice for people if they can be sure about that. because I think some things you'll enjoy doing, which will make it not feel like work, which means your stress levels are down. If there's stuff you've taken on that you know you can do, but it takes you a lot of energy to get to do that, and you don't really want to do it, that can be stressful. So it's just that, really. And just stay obsessed about your cash flow and your accounts. Get a good accountant, don't do it yourself. An accountant, for example, just there saved me like tens of thousands of pounds on tax by just spotting a few things. So no matter what they're going to cost you, 2, 3, 4, 5 grand a year, they could save you so much money. That's really important. So that is the first thing I would do, is get a financial person. You can do your own invoicing and stuff, but get Receipt Bank, get a bookkeeper, and get a finance person. Definitely. Yeah. Get a podcast.
Amazing. Wow. Thank you, Mark. loads of great advice, loads of great content. Yeah. Just, thank you so much for your time.
That's all right. Pleasure.
And just sort of finally, where can people find you? Social, LinkedIn. What's the best way to get in touch with you?
All of it, yeah. So I'm just Mark McCulloch on LinkedIn. I think it's the Food and Drink Marketer. I think it says Supersonic _ Inc. INC on Insta and Twitter. You'll find me on Facebook if you want to, but it's more sort of personal stuff on there. I don't tend to use Facebook really that much for business, but I don't think you can do everything, And what else? Supersonic Food Marketing Podcast is on iTunes and Spotify and Google. What do you say? Is it Google Podcasts it's called now?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And then I've got another series called the Spectacular Marketing Podcast, was before that. But yeah, I had some fun guests. I've had Mark Ritson, the amazing marketing professor. I had Gary Vaynerchuk, the much celebrated digital powerhouse. Fatboy Slim, which was really exciting. Wow. So that was cool. And then just physically where you'll find me, I'm usually around the Soho area in London, and I'm in the back end of Brighton. That's where I try to be, but it doesn't always work out that way. So we'll see how we get on. So yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Fab. Thank you, Mark. Well, I'll put all of that in the description below. But yeah, like I said, just thank you so much, and hope it helps some people out there figure out a little bit more about consultancy in the food and drink industry. And it's a very exciting industry to be involved in, but has its pros and cons like any other. So just thanks for all your advice.
Pleasure. No, thanks for having me. Thanks so much.
No worries. Cheers, Mark.
See you.